More Than Metaphors is a virtual love space for those poetic and poetic-ish voices to examine the question, what happens when we find the courage to live our poetry out loud? A conversation led by me, Dr. Keisha Brown, an author, educator, entrepreneur, and poet. More Than Metaphors combines guest interviews and posts from my blog, which focuses on transformative learning, love, justice, and liberation. Each episode of this podcast will provide encouragement for leading more meaningful, spirited, and poetic lives.
Hush not, child, and don't cry. Your folks might understand you.
Hello, and welcome back, More Than Metaphors family. I am so excited for today's guest, Dr. Satira Streeter-Corbett. Dr. Satira is a licensed clinical psychologist and the founder and executive director of Ascension's Psychological Services Incorporated. She is a 1997 summa cum laude graduate of Wilberforce University and a 2001 graduate of the Virginia Consortium Program in Clinical Psychology. Her area of expertise is in working with individuals and couples and has specialized in teaching and implementing effective, culturally responsive techniques to her community. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Satira Streeter-Corbett.
I am Dr. Satira Streeter-Corbett, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and a certified Gottman couples therapist. Back in 2004, I founded and now serve as the executive director of Ascension Psychological Services in Washington, D.C. I am a 1997 summa cum laude graduate of Wilberforce University and a 2001 graduate of the Virginia Consortium Program in Clinical Psychology, where my concentration was family therapy. I have vast experience in working with individuals and couples, and I've specialized in teaching and implementing effective, culturally responsive techniques in my community. I founded Ascensions to serve the needs of families in Anacostia, the most poverty-stricken area of Washington, D.C. Ascensions provides therapy, advocacy, and therapeutic groups for couples, parents, and women. I also facilitate monthly psychoeducational workshops on trauma, effective discipline, and protecting our youth from sexual predators. I am the proud wife of retired Sergeant Major Kevin Corbett and the proud mother of Kai Corbett and Cole Corbett.
Well, welcome, More Than Metaphors family. I am so excited today to have the remarkable Dr. Satira Streeter-Corbett here on our podcast to talk with us, to help us heal, to help us laugh a little bit, because it's been that kind of year. And it's only been, 6 months? It feels like the longest 45 years. And it's only been 6 months. But I'm really looking forward to my conversation with Sister Doctor to help us sort of make sense of what's going on, and as well as help our families during this time. So, Dr. Satira, thank you for coming in and chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Now, Satira, where are you quite literally on the planet? I'm here in Southern California. Are you in Virginia, Maryland, D.C.?
I am in Northeast Washington, D.C.
Nice.
D.C.
Nice.
proper.
Oh, D.C. proper. I had another D.C. native on a few episodes ago. Now, are you originally from the D.C. area, or where'd you grow up?
I was about to stop because D.C. natives get mad when you claim status and you don't have status. I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, but I have been here 20 years. So they said that gives you kind of a card that you kind of get to pass. You're not a native, but you do get to say you're a Washingtonian.
Oh, okay. All right. So you got that pass.
Yeah,
okay.
I got that pass, but
Nice.
never a native.
Nice. And now your practice, Ascensions, is in the DC area. Could you tell us a little bit about your practice, your team? But even before that, how did you get into this whole field of psychology? What was your path?
I'm glad you asked. In my path, unfortunately, many of us as African American women is not that bright and sunny one where I just sat and said, what can I do when I grow up? It was a path I chose out of necessity. I unfortunately grew up in the foster care system, and I remember going into foster care, like officially. I'd always been some child and family services involvement, but I remember officially being placed in a foster home at the age of 10. And of course, when you're placed in a foster home with a mother who is drug addicted and has bipolar disorder and not having a father, the first thing they do is send you to therapy. And I remember being 10 years old, and there was a European American woman. She was young, and I think she was trying to figure her life and her career out. And she would sit and look at me, and I would look at her. And she really wanted me to spend my session, explaining to her what it was like to be, a young Black girl from the hood with no father, with a mother who ran up and down the street naked half the time. She was trying to figure that out because she had no idea how to help me. So at that point, I figured out, you know what? I'm going to do this when I grow up, and I'm going to do this 100 million times better. And so from age 10, I always knew that this was my path. I knew that I was going to be a psychologist. I knew I was going to work with Black people, and I knew I was going to do it better than what the services my mother had, the services I had. And I have to date, hundreds and hundreds of clients who would agree that I have done it better. And not done it better because, I'm that special or I'm that learned. I've done it better because I care that much. Like, I don't see my clients as these people I'm going to work to help. I see my clients as my community. Like, these are folks that look like me. And again, that whole not having a daddy thing means they could literally be my brothers and sisters, right?
Right,
So I always say I put that special care out like their family because they are. So psychology has been my passion. I wasn't one of those people that got to school and changed their major and did that and the other. I just knew that the work that I'm doing right now at 45 years old was the work that I would always do.
That's an amazing story. And how you brought it full circle and how you broaden your circle. You have a team with you. Could you talk a little bit about your team and some of the methods you used? I know I looked at your website, and one of them is the Gottman.
The Gottman method?
I'm sorry, yes. Talk a little bit about that and how your team works with our community.
So right now, my team is a group of clinical psychologists. It was really important to me that when I started my organization, Ascension Psychological Services, back in 2004, that I wanted to make sure that I had the brightest and the best. And not saying if you haven't gotten your terminal degree, that doesn't mean you're not the brightest or the best. But I wanted to make sure that I had people that had devoted like their life to this whole psychology thing, because at the end of the day, to be a psychologist, to be a clinical psychologist, you have to do your grad school, you have to do your dissertation, you have to do your clinical internship. And that's a whole process in and of itself, being able to get an accredited clinical internship. Then you have to pass your licensing exam. So I wanted people that didn't just decide that one day they wanted to be a psychologist and they changed from being, doing another profession just to switch over to psychology. I wanted people that had a passion for this work. I wanted people who knew that there was one set of information that they were going to send us, teach us at our respective universities, and we had to learn all of that. But then there's a whole nother set of information that we had to seek out ourselves to be able to help our people. Because one thing that we know is psychology wasn't created with us in mind. Right. If it was created for anything, it was created to help oppress us even more, because that's the history of Western psychology, especially in this country. So I couldn't just pick any old psychologist or somebody that just had a degree off of the street. I have been blessed to have Dr. Apuka, Dr. Haywood, Dr. Mark Bolden, all of these individuals who have done the work both on themselves. They've done the work in the community. They've done the work through their research and in school to make sure that they are fit to serve our families. And that was extremely important to me. Now, the Gottman method I'm certified as a Gottman therapist. And Gottman is a method that comes from John and Julie Gottman, two psychologists and researchers that are out of the Seattle area, actually. And 40 years ago, John Gottman started looking at relationships. And at the time, he tells us there were 2,000 studies talked about why people got divorced. But there were only 6 studies that talked about what made people stay together. And he set out to change that. He wanted to know, why do people stay together? What does it take for people to be able to grow their love and to grow their relationships? And once I learned about what he was doing and what he had done and read some of his books, I knew that was a method that I wanted to learn. I didn't want to be the type of couples therapist that just did what works for me and my husband, or what didn't work for me and a boyfriend before. I wanted to do something that was based in research, that had proven adults, because I don't feel like relationships or anything within psychology is anything to be played with or tested around. I wanted to make sure I was doing bona fide work that was going to help people get to the next level. So now I really travel around the country pre-pandemic and giving them the tools that they need. Not making it about, again, as a therapist, it's not about me. And I tell people the first day I meet them, I don't want to be your therapist forever. I don't even want to be your therapist for a long time. I want to give you the tools that I have so that you can heal yourself. And that's what I go around doing. I go around giving people tools so they can make their relationships better. And that's my main focus at this point in my career.
What's interesting about that, Dr. Satira, is the way I came in contact with you was from our very first guest, Keon Furness and his wife, Rashaki Furness. Shout out to them.
Hey.
And them talking about the work, right? Having been divorced before, having gone through their own process and healing and figuring out what does it mean to recouple after decoupling, and everything that goes along with that. Mm-hmm. And then I hear you talk about the work, and I want to give you tools. I don't want to be your therapist forever. Mm-mm. I want you to take this and keep it moving, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'd love to hear you, if you're willing. And I know, there was a doctor-client privilege. You can't tell everybody's business. But if there are any stories, especially given everything we're dealing with right now with the pandemic, and families are struggling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Children are struggling. Our kids in our communities, we're seeing a lot of death. Mm-hmm. What are some of the stories that you can tell us about how people are working through this, and how you're getting people to what my mom always said, getting people to next, right? So we're stuck here now, but what's next? Right. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One thing that I teach in my workshops is about the 4 horsemen. It was called, the official name is the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. That used to be funny until we actually went through a whole, what feels like apocalypse in this whole pandemic. So right. I just call it the 4 horsemen. But what I teach couples is that there are 4 things that they do in relationships that are the 4 biggest predictors of divorce. And when these weapons are used within their communication, when they have conflict, we can pretty much tell these couples aren't going to be together long. So those 4 things are, if they're utilizing criticism, if they're utilizing defensiveness, contempt, or stonewalling, which is where you just shut down in conversation. If those things are happening and happening regularly, then we know if we don't correct that they're on a path of destruction. They may stay together, but they're not going to stay together happily. So a lot of the couples that I've talked to has been just that there's a whole lot of, and a criticism is different than a complaint. So if I have a complaint, I can say to you, you know what, I really don't like the way you made me feel when you yelled at me. That triggered me. That didn't feel right in my spirit. That doesn't work for me when you talk to me like that. So that is, a complaint. That's me telling you how I feel and how you're impacting me. Whereas a criticism is, you are so rude and nasty and trifling, and I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know why you talk to people that way. You have some nerve. That's me going all in, saying always, saying never, like all of that. That is a criticism. So I teach couples, how do you get what you need to say out but not frame it in a way where you are attacking your partner's character. You're attacking their personality. So those are the things. So criticism is really big. Contempt is another thing that's big. And out of all four of those, again, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, out of all four, the most detrimental is contempt. Because in contempt, not only are you giving a criticism, you are criticizing, but then you're also saying that you're superior to this person in some way. So that's like me saying, not only are you trifling, but I am not that way. I just wasn't raised to be that way. I would never deal with life the way that you're dealing with life. So it's basically taking this thing that, you're bad, but I'm better. And once that happens, and that can happen, all kinds of ways. Like, I heard a couple today sneak it in because he said that, she's so high strung and she just, she gets all hyped up and she doesn't know how to handle her problems and she doesn't know how to handle her stuff at work. But me, I let stuff roll off my back. I'm able to handle my life. I'm able to get. So what did he do? That was contempt. You're bad. You don't know how to handle life. But me, I got all of this in control. Contempt, guess where they're headed? Unless they turn it around. So I'm working day and night to say, hey, I need to point out what you just did. We've already talked about how detrimental that is. I need you to stop. How can you reframe that? How can you repair what you just did? And that's the other thing that I teach. The couples that are masterful at their relationships is not that they don't have conflict. It's not that they don't get into arguments, but they know how to repair. They know how to say sorry. They know how to say, you know what? I went too far. Let me take that back. So that is what heals relationships. That's what does. That's what turns things around. Being able to avoid the fourth horseman, but then when they come out, being able to repair when you've made a misstep.
Ooh. Ooh, okay, so you just hit all kinds of stuff. So as someone who's lived through divorce, the four horsemen and their cousin Fred came right on through my marriage. And so here we are. And I say that in jest, but I say there's a fifth horseman then. There's resentment.
Right. And resentment comes from those things. It's like a cycle. Because what happens is, you criticize me, then what do? I'm defensive. Then you criticize some more, then I'm defensive. And, when you think about all of it, even the stonewalling, the shutting down, and traditionally, like the research says, that who is most likely to criticize? It says women. And who is most likely to stonewall, shut down? It says men. So basically, men will say, she nags me. She keeps nagging me, criticism. And then she says, well, I keep nagging him because he keeps not responding. So it's like this vicious cycle. And until, the analogy I used earlier, do you remember, not the good playgrounds, but when you went to the little raggedy playgrounds where they had those merry-go-rounds that you had to start with your feet and then you jumped on and it was metal.
It squeaked and it was like tilted.
It would burn you in the summertime. It was hot, like all of that type of stuff. Right. It's almost like, we are on those type of merry-go-rounds in our relationships. And there's a risk. Like if you were to jump off one of those things, it might jack you up too. Right. Or do you just stay on and wait until it fizzles out? And by the time it fizzles out, you're nauseated, you're all dizzy, you're falling all over the place. Like, fixing the marriage and doing the right thing is risky. Because it's going to leave you vulnerable. It's leaving you putting your heart out there. It's leaving you telling, your partner, this is where I am. This is why this is a trigger to me. When you do this, it reminds me about what my dad did to me or what my dad did to my mom. That doesn't feel good. I haven't worked through that yet. And when you do those type of things, you're re-traumatizing me all over again. Like it's oftentimes a lot to have to say all that. But, at some point, we got to figure out a way to get off of that raggedy merry-go-round and do something different with our relationships. So that's what I do. I save people from the raggedy merry-go-round.
Right. And making sure that their kids don't have to get on that same raggedy merry-go-round. Because that's the other piece of this is as adults, as we're going through our relationship issues, our kids are going, if we have kids, are going through the exact same toxicity and it's living in them. You've put together an amazing project for our young people entitled Black Genius, a guided journal through history and affirmation. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe share some of the gifts that you have in there?
Absolutely. So 3 years ago, Ascension Psychological. My organization is a nonprofit. So, from time to time, people give us a little bit of money to do a couple things. And we got a small grant. So we got like $1,000. And I said that I wanted to use this grant to buy journals for our African-American kids, our young people. But I didn't want it to be any type of journal. I wanted to be a journal that had writing prompts. I wanted to have affirmations. I wanted to have Black history facts. And I wanted to take the kids every single day of the year so that they know that their history is significant. And so they know that they're significant. Little did I know that all the activities of 2020 would come up. Little did I know that I would have an additional charge to make sure that these kids really know that their lives matter, that their ancestors' lives matter, that their elders' lives matter. So it really, it's interesting because, I go to church every Sunday, and at the beginning of the year, there's always a pile of calendars right next to the bulletins. And those calendars are typically, sometimes they come from a funeral home. So again, that should include me in. But, on those calendars every single day, they have these Black history facts. And I was like, oh, good. This will be easy to put this journal together. I'll get me one of those calendars. I'll write in the facts. I'm a psychologist, so I can come up with writing prompts and I'll come up with these things. This will be easy. Well, what I didn't realize is usually the funeral home calendars have the days that people die in it. So it's like, such and such, so-and-so died, such and such days, so-and-so was assassinated. And I was like, ooh, it took a long time because then I had to start doing some research. What happened on June 10th in Black history? What happened on July the 3rd in Black history? So I had to do that. And then every day also has a quote related to the fact. So after I found all 366 facts, I had to go back and find an associated quote. And that was easy if it was somebody like Jesse Jackson or Martin Luther King. But some quotes, when we're talking about Crispus Attucks, I don't know what he said and what he said is. So, finding, again, associated facts. And then we went through and said, oh, my goodness, there's one more step. After we do these writing prompts, this connected to the fact, I want to ask a curiosity question. Because one thing that as an educator, that what we want to spark in our kids is curiosity. We don't want them just to learn for the sake of learning. We want them to be curious. We want to spark that. So I was like, oh, I need to ask a curiosity question at the end of each day so that they can, take what's on the page and possibly do some more research and go a little bit deeper into whatever the day is. So 3 years later, we have Black Genius, a guided journal through history and affirmation. And anyone who is familiar with Adinkra symbols will notice this this image, which I've had more than one person that doesn't look like us. Like, why you got that chicken on everything?
It's not the chicken.
Not a chicken. This is Sankofa. Mm-hmm. And we know the meaning. The meaning of Sankofa is, you'll see it some places it says, go back and fetch it. And I thought that was really significant because we want our young people to go back and get their history and get that strength and keep moving forward and pass it on to other folks. So it's the whole thing of looking back, but moving forward and making sure that we connect all of it together. And that's why the symbolism was really important to me.
I'd love for you to read what you have for June 10th.
So today, June 10th, in 1893, actress and singer Hattie McDaniel was born to formerly enslaved parents in Wichita, Kansas. In 1940, she was the first African-American to win an Academy Award. She appeared in over 300 films. And so the quote that I put from Miss McDaniel is, faith is the Black person's Federal Reserve System. So I thought that was significant because she's like, no, we have, that's what has our back when we have this faith and keep pushing forward. And as I said, each page has a writing prompt. So the writing prompt for today, June 10th, is my faith is important to me because, and then the children have, so the curiosity fact came from that. And it says, I'm curious, which HBCU did she request that her Oscar be given? So it's like, oh, and the hope is, for older kids, of course, they can do this by themselves. And hopefully they would be like, wow, I wonder where she got an Oscar. I wonder which HBCU, and have them to kind of guess first. Well, maybe she was down south. Maybe it was Jackson State, or maybe it was Spelman. but I would want them to research and figure out where it was. And it was actually to Howard. So that is basically how it goes. So again, it happens. I see the book either being used in the family where, if you have younger kids, for them to have a conversation like that. And I included a video of that on my social media account of a father actually asking their children about the fact for that particular day. That particular day was the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. And, talking to them about that fact and what that meant. So either that can happen in terms of a family conversation or a conversation in the classroom, or, for an older child, they would be able to do this independently. But it really is meant to be a family kind of activity.
I love it. And I'm going to be a little biased. The fact that it's soror Hattie McDaniel that you chose, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. Hey, I feel a certain way, but
right,
loving.
Now, of course, I'm representing for Delta Sigma Theta, but I love all of my
yes, all of the Black sororities and fraternities.
And one of my best friends, like they say, one of my best friends is a Sigma Gamma Rho.
There you go. We're everywhere. Much love, much love. But the fact that you put together this wonderful opportunity. So it's more than just a journal. It's an opportunity for our families to heal and grow and learn. But it also, the beauty of the symbol of Sankofa, it's us looking back and taking this and moving it forward and empowering our next generation leaders. Now, I want to ask you, has writing and reading, has that always been sort of your thing? Because I want to make sure we connect to the subtext of the show, which is how do we go about living our poetry out loud? And poetry, it doesn't have to be explicitly poetry, right? Whatever it is that brings us peace, that helps us deal with the realities of life and gives us courage. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So it's interesting. After I finished the books, one of my first stops that I wanted to make sure had several copies of this was the foster care system that I grew up in. So Franklin County Children's Services in Columbus, Ohio, I made a phone call, and that phone call led me to reach someone else. And I said, hey, from 1985 to 1993, I was a foster care. I was a child in foster care with your agency. And one of the things that kept me going and kept me sane throughout that whole period of ups and downs was knowing that this wasn't my always. I knew that there would be some point that my life would be better, that I would be able to make my own choices, that I wouldn't be a ward of the court. And that keeping my eyes and keeping, my heart on that is what got me through. And I said, I have written a book and I created this journal. I finished this project that I think would be very helpful for other foster children to be able to tell their stories, because so often children are just like, their story doesn't matter. They're made to feel like, oh, what they're going through is insignificant because they're just kids. Their voices are taken away. So I wanted to make sure that they got several hundred copies of this book. So that children in the foster care system can understand that they need to write their story, they need to process their story, they need to think about their future, and they need to also connect with their paths, the things that have already happened to them, so that they can work through what they have to work through. So yes, I think writing has always been an extremely important part of my journey. And it's interesting, a lot of times when people first look at the title, they think a guided journey through history and affirmation. And that, that was kind of purposeful, because it's a journey, but it's a journey through journaling. Mm-hmm. And that's why the stories and people's stories and knowing their stories and telling their stories, even if they're telling their story to themselves, is so imperative, is so important.
Oh, that reminds me of something that one of our guests talked about, the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And you uncover a lot of that in journaling. I've been journaling since I was, 15. And some of the stuff, it's like, oh, okay, that's what I was going through at 15.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the kids now, it's like, how can I share that story? But I don't have to share my story. What is your story?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say about your experience, especially right now? So what I'd love to do, I'm going to tell our listeners and our viewers now. I'm buying 5 copies of the book. I'm giving 5 copies away. So what you need to do is email us. I have the email. It'll be in the details below. And we will send you a copy of the book. Signed?
Absolutely.
Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Right.
So we started this. Our viewers, our listeners, they didn't get to see how we started this. So before we had even hit record, one of the things that we did was we prayed. We centered ourselves. And given everything that we're experiencing now, you hear a lot of people saying, well, millennials are moving away from church. They're moving away from religion. They're moving away from spirit. Has that necessarily been what you've experienced in possibly working with our next generation leaders? And if so, could you talk a little bit about how or in what ways does it show up in your practice, the way that you work with your clients, if at all?
Mm-hmm. Right. So as a Black psychologist, it's interesting in Western psychology. I remember my 12th grade English teacher at West High School in Columbus, Ohio, when I told her I wanted to be the type of psychologist that connects people to their spirit. So I wanted to focus on spirituality and psychology. And she said, that's not how psychology works. You're kind of ignorant to how all of that works. Psychology is completely separate from spirituality. And I was like, oh. And I later went on to Wilberforce University, a wonderful HBCU, and learned that wasn't necessarily so. That there was a connection, like what Western psychology does, and what Western folks do, period, is they try to compartmentalize us. Whereas, oh, this is your spirituality in this box, this is your physical health in this block, this is your mental health over in this box, there's your relational health, it goes over here. But no, as African people, we know that all of that we're one with all of that. So, I do see that some younger people have gotten away from their church base, but not necessarily their spiritual base. We could have conversations for days of how church folks have made it unattractive to go to church, and with restrictions and all that. And I mean, I guess I can't say church folks without including myself in that, because I go to church every Sunday, albeit online now. But at the same time, recognizing that it hasn't been the most fulfilling, welcoming space for, all kinds of people, whether it's, Black people. Like I know I've gone to churches that has had, white Jesus on the wall. I can't rock with that, because that's just not historically accurate. I know Jesus looked like me. We know churches that have, used our same gender loving brothers and sisters only in their music ministry, but then wanted them to hide who they were or cast them out when they found other things out. We know what, churches have done to women in terms of, rape, molestation, all kinds of things. I have a friend that just wrote a book called Keep Your Pecker in Your Pants that is targeted to, the hypocrisy and all that's gone on in the molestation that she had to go through from her stepfather, who was a big time pastor. So all of those things have made church not the greatest place for a lot of us to be. I think, if you are an older Black man, church may be your whole vibe, because it was kind of created with you in mind. But, I have seen younger people, seeking out other forms of spirituality, whether it's, going to Yoruba or going to, African belief systems, or, just practicing, meditation and connecting with their higher power in those ways. So I see Africans as spirit, and I see that practice often, but it just may not be going to, so-and-so AME church every Sunday.
Right. And something that you talked about reminded me of the phenomenon of church hurt. Have you heard about? And some people saying, you know what? if that's the God you serve, and that God is condoning that, I'm good, right? And thinking about what does that mean when we are healing from that hurt and the hurt all around us that got us here.
Absolutely.
Right. And thinking about how do we heal as community, heal within community. So thank you for sharing that. Now, given all of that, one question that I always ask my guests is, what advice would you like to give our next generation leaders?
I would ask them to be mindful of their relationships. You know, I see more people either elevated by their relationships or destroyed by relationships. And this is relationships with, romantic partners, with platonic relationships, with family, but really be mindful of the relationships, be mindful of the people they let into their lives, be mindful of the people they push out. Know that their reflections, their relationships they have are a reflection of them and how, they are rolling and how they are moving. Being mindful, if you are the person who is doing best out of your entire circle of friends, then you need another circle, because you should be somewhere in the middle. There should be some people that you are pulling up, and there are some people that should be pulling you up. So you have to really keep all of those relationships balanced and in check, because there could be a lot of destruction from not doing that.
Okay, so you wait. You can't just drop that and roll off now. Wait a minute. Okay, so I have heard different kind of advice around that. Of course, yes, you expand your circle, or you have to keep your circle small because you talk about. I haven't heard it quite like the way you put it. I know I did, maybe because the circles I hang out with. No, I'm not hating on my friends. I'm not. No, but you know what? No, I'm gonna put myself out there. I'm gonna tell you, and I know that y'all offer free services sometimes, and I know this is not one of those moments. But one of the purposes, you laughing. The reason why I created this podcast is this was going to be, and this is a safe space for me to do my healing work and bring a whole bunch of people with me to do their stuff. So I am a first generation college graduate. I grew up in Inglewood, California. Inglewood, still love it, and I feel most comfortable in circles with folks from home, because as an academician working in higher ed, some of my colleagues don't roll like me, right? And it's not necessarily a comfortable place. And there were times when I had to do a little bit too much shifting. And now as I get closer to 50, I'm like, I'm not shifting no more. I'm done with the imposter syndrome. I'm done with the stereotype threat, and I'm done with the people pleasing. So I'm going to sit and own space where I feel the most comfortable. And then I hear you just say, Sister Doctor, if you are, and I'm not saying that the folks around me are not doing well. They are, but they look at me and say, but Keisha, though, they call me Brokra. Rude ass. Broke Oprah. I'm you know who you are, you know who I'm talking about. But what you're saying is, okay, so that's fine. And again, going to next. Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen that done, or even how you've done it yourself, and what that experience was like?
Right. I think it is kind of a reflection. A lot of times the friends, we like to keep our crew. We like to keep our crew of folks that are, that we go way back with, and they may have some qualities that, you have your girlfriend who is really, really bad. So I would say to maybe think of it in different ways. So you have this one girlfriend who is horrible with money. Like, not to let her borrow no money, not to co-sign for nothing. If y'all are going on a trip and she says she's going to get you back later, that you might as well just gift her with the ticket. So those are those people. So she's not doing good in the money area. But when it comes to somebody who is going to roll with you and be willing to go and slash the tires if you need to of this dude that's treated you bad. Just joking. Don't slash anybody's tires. I'm talking to your audience. But if you need your ride or die, she's going to be that person. So, she is a lot more compassionate than you are. And she is able she can get a prayer up to the heavens. So she's doing really, really well in that area. She's not doing well in this. So, having those friends, but you have this other girlfriend who is on Oprah level for real and has, money that she could just make it rain wherever you all go. And she's done very good financially, but maybe her spiritual life is a little off and she comes to you for that. So really being able to have these different levels and never thinking, okay, I need to have a level of folks that are beneath me, but you need to have this level of folks that you are able to pull up. But you, again, have to have that level of folks that are able to pull you up. And it may be not pull you up totally. It may be able to pull you up in these particular areas where you are lacking, where you are struggling. Just like you are pulling these girlfriends up in these areas where they need some guidance. They need to figure out the motivation to get through school, or they're not doing right, necessarily by their children. And they're all confused about this whole child rearing thing and how they need to model this and how they need to use patience. So really being mindful that, there are these relationships that have these different layers, but there should be some pulling up and there should be some getting pulled up.
Okay. And it's Sankofa.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It is. It is. Okay. I feel better now. I'll probably talk to you later on about
Absolutely.
what that looks like for you, or what that has looked like for you in your life. I'd love to hear your story.
Absolutely.
So you brought up the thing about patience and kids and helping those of us who are, patience and kids in a pandemic. Help, right? When we say that, not even just stretched as adults, as parents, but also as teachers. We've lost a lot of teachers to just the stressors of the pandemic. There's some people who were teaching online and mid-session, like, what, I can't, shut down, quit. And some parents are trying to do the same thing. You're like, I can't. Can you talk to us, some of us adults, around maybe a few tips to help us be better patient parents?
Right. So, as we talked about a moment ago, I do a lot of couples therapy, but, it also works for relationship therapy. So when we talk about those 4 horsemen, we need to incorporate that in the lives of our children. We need to make sure we're not criticizing them. We need to make sure that we're not showing contempt. How do parents show contempt? Oh my goodness, when I was your age, I would have never gotten started with my mother. I would have never gotten a D on my report card. Not saying what you're doing is raggedy and I'm so much better than you, right? So we have to be mindful of that. We have to be mindful of defensiveness. When our child comes to us and says, Mom, that really made me feel bad when you said that. Well, I'm the mama, so I'm going to do what I need to do. You'll have no idea what it's like to raise you and I'm under pressure. No, that's defensiveness. That's not taking responsibility for hearing and validating what your child just said. Stonewalling. How often do we get so overwhelmed with work and our other relationships and all that? By the time we get to our kids, we have nothing left and we just looking at them. And that's it. And that's where the patience goes. So really being mindful of those things. And I feel like, so that's the start. But communication in not just like we all hear about communication, got to communicate better, but really listening to our children. So if they want to tell you a story, about Roblox and Pokemon and how they got to catch it all. And guess what you need to do? You can't do what I just did. You can't. You sit there, you like, for real? You got the green? And really validate what's going on in their little world. We listen and let our kids know that their stories are valid, that we want to hear their stories, that we're not going to take over the conversation and talk about, what's going on with us. We really are taking time to listen. And the other thing that I feel like is really, really helpful is something that I teach my couples to do, but I also teach my parents to do. And that's the State of the Union. Every week, we need to be having a State of the Union conversation. With kids, this is how it goes. You give them 2 glows and a grow. And I'm saying glow, GLOW, 2 things that they glowed in, 2 things that they did very well this week. I love the way that you cleaned up after yourself, when you left the bathroom on Tuesday. Sometimes we got to be real specific because we got to catch them when they're doing good, right? And I love the way that you apologize to your brother after you broke his toy. I really like that. And I really appreciate you do that. But we also sandwich in between that a grow. Now, this is one area that I feel like you could grow. I got a call home from the teacher, and the teacher said, while you were down in my basement doing homeschool, you look like you were watching TV, or you look like you were on the game or something. And I need you to take this seriously. I know it's hard. Mommy's going to give you breaks. We're going to really enjoy our weekends in the summer, but I need you to focus and do this whole school year, out in a way that I need you to do it. So that's your grow. So 2 glows and a grow. And then you end the conversation with, how can I make you feel more loved this week? And again, this is hard for parents because we come from a lot of us come from generations where children were seen and not heard, but it's painful. But yeah, I sit and I'm like, okay, I'm ready for my 2 glows and my grow. So they'll say, oh, I really like the way that I know you don't like playing basketball, but I like the way that you sat outside and shot hoops with us, for an hour the other day. Or they'll say, I really like that even though you like onions, the fact that, I don't like onions and you made the spaghetti without onions. And then I let them, and I encourage them to give me a grow. What could I have done better? And, sometimes they're like, I was trying to tell you about the new Flash movie and you were not paying attention to me. You were on the phone and I looked and I knew you were on Facebook. So you weren't listening to me. And that's a growth. That's my sons telling me, I need you when it's our time. I need you to hone in on me. I need you to focus on me. So being able to take those and share that. And then, they ask me, how do I make you feel more loved this week? And this is a conversation. So being able to have those conversations on a weekly basis keeps us from having kids to sweep stuff under the rug, having kids like we want to create a culture of appreciation in the house. I appreciate who you are. I appreciate what you do. And that's how to do it, to really talk about, paying attention to the things that are going right, but also paying attention to the things you're doing that don't make me feel so great and the things I need you to shift up on.
So Tyra, can I ask you, how old are your sons?
So they are 10 and 11.
Okay. Back to back. Okay. Because I was going to ask you, do you have any who are about to be teens yet? And how?
So that 11-year-old is, he'll be 12 in August. And, I'm watching him change. Like I'm 5'8.5". So I'm tall for a woman. And he's catching up. I think he's about 5'7.5". So I'm watching him grow. I'm watching his voice get deeper. I'm watching him, not want to cuddle as much as I would like him to want to cuddle. I'm watching those things. But I'm also watching, some of these stressors, how some things are not like he's been silly all of his life, but how some things are becoming a little bit more serious to him because we live in a serious age. I got him involved in a debate club. And so what they do with debate, they pick a topic and they flow with that all year long. So they learn it in and out. And the debate was about what he had to learn about was school resource officers and police brutality. So every debate he did this year has something to do with that. And just him having to to grapple with that. Like, so sometimes he would be on the affirmative and, this is why we need the police. And sometimes he would be on the other side talking about, nope, we need to defund the police and all that. And him being able to learn to think about it from both sides. And he really got into it this year and really did really, really good. And this is a kid who, again, loves Pokemon and Roblox and anime. And, he just told me that he wants his 13th birthday for us to go to Japan so he can go to an anime convention. But he, seeing that he has those interests still, but still knowing that he knows about the seriousness of life. They did a couple of really good specials about the Tulsa Massacre, last week. And we sat and watched it, and he asked questions, and he had really good questions. And I could hear him, in school the next day. He goes to a school for all Black boys. So they talk about this type of stuff a lot. And I could hear him bringing up points where I didn't even know that he was really listening about, what would happen to if they would have left those Black people alone in Oklahoma and Tulsa, where could they be now? What the heck, how could they have been a model city for so many of us, African Americans and African American communities, and how white people just kind of snuffed all of that out very purposely. He was able to talk about how they were looking for an opportunity to kind of get up in there to destroy all that we had built. So just knowing that I'm in awe. I'm in awe of both of my children. But knowing that it really, sometimes I have to dig through to see those awe moments, because there's other times where they're tearing up my house and eating all my food, and I'm not so happy with that.
Right. And then you have to go back to your 2 glows and a grow, right?
Right.
Stop tearing up my house. So in all seriousness, you brought up a really good point of the times our kids are living in, right? Some 30-some years ago, we didn't have social media. TikTok wasn't a thing. So the level of exposure to life was different. And life was still happening. Don't get me wrong. Police brutality, all of it was still going on. It was just the exposure was different. Mm-hmm. Could you talk to us a little bit about, given the age that we're in, how can we support our young people in being healthy, given all of the information that's coming at them?
Mm-hmm. It really does continue to go back to letting them know that their voice matters, letting them know that they matter, letting them know that they can contribute something to this world, that they are, as much as there is a whole sex of people that are committed to making them feel small, knowing that they have, a group of people that are committed to making sure that they know how brilliant they are, that they know that they are geniuses, and that they know they have people that they can fall back on. So really just celebrating. We have to celebrate our young people and their accomplishments, and we have to set them up to have even more accomplishments.
Could you talk about that?
Right. So, creating opportunities, that all the young people say, oh, they just won't let me be great, when it comes to anything. But how about we figure out ways to let them be great? How do we let them be great in the classroom? How do we let them be great in their extracurricular activities? And I'm not talking about the culture of giving trophies to everybody for everything, but really being able to see the genius in our kids and see those areas that may not come out in the same areas that it came out for us. One thing was really hard for me. Number one, being a woman that used to be a girl who used to like school and would pop out A's with no problem. And then I get these boys and I'm like, where come from? Like you don't want to sit and read for hours? Like I thought that's what we do.
Right. Right.
But recognizing where they're great at and celebrating that, and not trying to get them to conform to what we necessarily want them to be or need them to be. Of course, we provide a pathway for them to go down, but making sure that we know and we can guide them through some other ways as well. So really, again, celebrating their genius becomes what it's all about right now.
I'm going to tell you right now, you haven't met my daughter, but she already loves you because of what you said right there. Because I haven't met a book yet that I don't love, right? And she's like, you know what? these books over here, yes, and all those books that you got me, you can take those back. I appreciate them, but here, I want to read all the anime, the whole series of this, right? And I've given. I'm not going to say I've given up. I've given over to what she really gravitates to, what she loves. Mm-hmm. And she is glowing because of that. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is where I need your brilliance to push back. Is there some things that I'm like, no, that's age inappropriate. I'm not comfortable with that. So the answer is not. How do we make space for that brilliance? Mm-hmm. And also have the boundaries of not quite yet, that's age inappropriate, or just no.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's parenting. It's really, that's the one advice, the one piece of advice that I was given years ago that sticks with me to this day is the whole concept of roots and wings. That we give our children roots, and we know that they're rooted, and we hold them down in some ways, but then we give them wings to fly in others. And when their wings, being able to tell her that your wings aren't ready for that just yet. You're not ready to fly in that area. So mommy is going to keep you rooted, and we're going to let you do anime, but we're going to let you do this right here. I like this author. I like the fact that they're not cussing. I like the fact that they're not, with the swords and knocking off each other's head. And this is something that maybe you can explore later. I'm going to tell you the reasons why I think you should leave it alone. But that's just not for where we are right now. So really being able to ground them in some things, and that's what parenting does, but then giving them their areas where they're able to fly and to make their own decisions. But putting those boundaries around, you can make the decisions, but these are your choices within this right here.
I appreciate that. And so just so you know, my ulterior motive is I'm going to be rewinding this back. Like Dr. Satira said, you remember this timestamp right here. So it's not just me. Right? But this is the way that we are loving our children in a time when there's so much that is coming against them. Right? Absolutely. Right. So I'd love to hear, because we started with your journey of how you became the psychologist you are now. Mm-hmm. I'd love for you to imagine that 10-year-old girl that you were so many years ago, mm-hmm. and the amazing psychologist you are now. What would you tell her, yourself, about what to expect in the next 10 years of your life?
Mm-hmm. Right. I would tell her it will get better. I would tell her, really, you need to listen when people say leave the boys alone because they can wait. Like you can tell me that I didn't need to have some type of boyfriend. And again, now as a psychologist in my 40s, I recognize, there was that longing for connection and family and all that. But I should have gotten that another way. They should have got me a dog or something. Mm-hmm. But I would have said to wait on that because there's experiences you're just not ready for right now. I would have said to be mindful of relationships, because, once you're in the foster care system and you learn that, things are fleeting and people can be in your life this day and be in your corner, and then you could be moved somewhere else and they're not. So I didn't know how to do relationships, and I was very good at just cutting folks off. Like, oh, she's mean to me, I'm done. So my boundaries were a little bit too rigid, and I didn't know how to really do relationships. I didn't know how to honor folks in a way and allow myself to be honored. So I would just say, be mindful of relationships and know that this is going to be better.
All right. Now I'd like to flip the question. Mm-hmm. We understand that our young people have wisdom as well. Mm-hmm. What would your 10-year-old self mm-hmm. say to you now as either words of advice or even words of gratitude? What do you think she'd say?
I think she would say, don't forget about me. So taking care of me, like I definitely believe in that whole inner child. I believe there's a little Satira that's right here in my core, that acts out sometimes, that has temper tantrums sometimes, and needs to be nurtured and needs to be assured. So she would tell me, don't forget about me. And she would tell me, don't forget about people like me. So don't forget about the children. Make sure that you keep your eyes as you're doing all this couple work, make sure you bring it back to how these couples are going to strengthen themselves for little people. So keep your eye on the children is what she would say to me now.
That's powerful. Keep your eye on the children. Well, Dr. Satira Streeter-Corbett, thank you so much for not only keeping your eye on our children, but keeping eyes on our families and our communities and our next generation leaders. I can't wait to get our copies of the book. And I'd love to talk to you again because I got more questions. I always got a question about something crazy going on in my head, in my heart. But thank you for sharing so much love and wisdom with our listeners and our readers. Did you have a piece that you wanted to share? Maybe one more piece from the journal?
Sure. Maybe in keeping our eyes on the children, I can read the quote that I wrote to the individuals that this journal lands in their hands. And what I said was, Black youth are Black geniuses. There are centuries of resilience, creativity, wisdom, talent, and intelligence in your DNA. It oozes out of your pores whenever you speak, write, think, or move. Your village must provide the spaces for you to express your rich Black thoughts so that your genius can continue to flourish. Dr. Satira.
Woo. Yes. Yes. You're like everything. I'm so glad.
Everything too.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so glad Keon connected us.
Yeah. Did he tell you he was my first freshman friend?
No, he didn't tell me that stuff.
He like I went to Wilberforce, long story short, on my own. My foster mother has said, oh, well, I'm not receiving any checks for you, so I can't hold your room. So when you go, you need to pack up your car and good luck in college. So I literally packed up my little 1985 Mercury Topaz with everything that I had to my name. So, whereas you see other kids like figuring out college with their parents and going to financial aid and all this type of stuff, it was just me. And Keon and his brother were there and they were like, you need some help? And I was like, sure. And I think they were there previously for like the summer bridge program. So they came and helped me unpack my car. They had been there a couple of days already. They showed me some stuff. So we always say that's my first freshman friend. So, things come full circle. Look, that was 28 years ago, back in 1993. Mm-hmm. And now they have introduced me to you and been able to be on this platform, sharing this message. So they, I think all of that is beautiful and the connection is real.
It is. It is. It is. And I'd love for you, to do a shameless plug for Ascensions, if you will. Let people know how to get in contact with you. I'll also add information in our detail box.
Okay.
Tell them a little bit how to get in contact with you all now.
Right. So if they have questions, one thing that I really love to do is, fly me out to do a workshop where you are. Please let me travel. Let me come to you. You don't have to come to me. But you can reach me at drsatira.com. Or you can reach Ascensions at www.2ascend, ASCEND.org. ToAscend.org. The name of the organization is Ascensions because I thought it was important that we as Black people use the things that we've gone through. Those are our stepping stones but then, we take and we rise above that. So we ascend. We use our past and we use our history, the pain, the struggle, the trauma, to ascend, to go higher, because there is always higher.
You're that higher, the movement even showed up in your selection for the More Than Metaphors playlist, because the two songs you chose was Curtis Mayfield's Move On Up and then The Impressions' Keep On Pushing. I mean, that encapsulates everything that you talked about with us today. So thank you, Dr. Satira, for everything that you're doing for our communities. And I'm looking forward to watching you ascend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for this opportunity.
I hope today's episode was helpful. I'd love to hear from you, hear about what you think, hear about what other questions are coming to your mind. Feel free to send me a message at anchor.fm/MTMetaphors/message. I look forward to connecting with you in our next episode. And until then, keep learning, keep thriving, keep moving towards liberation, and remember that our words, the power of our words, are so much more than metaphors. Talk to you soon.